Get ready for carnage with a capital K, where crying won't help you and neither will calling for your mommy. Misspelling stuff is so cool. So let's check out Skeleton Krew, a stylish isometric run and gun released in 1995 for the Amiga, Amiga CD, Mega Drive, and Sega Genesis, which is the version we'll mostly be looking at here, but I'll get into the differences later in the video. It was developed and published by Core Design, who would actually see a smash hit with Tomb Raider the following year, but here we have one of their final bits of output on the Genesis in the console's twilight years, and man, it is an edgy cyber slab of radness. The game opens up with a slick-looking cutscene setting the stage where moribund Cadaver has turned Krew City into a Monstro City, unleashing psychogenics mutant hordes to cause all sorts of chaos. So now it's up to the Skeleton Krew, 3 morbid mercenaries awoken from cryosleep who will do anything for the right amount of cash. This is all detailed further in the included comic and the manual as well, and they're fully committed to this whole K thing. What a glorious mess this manual is. Anyways, getting into the game, you can choose from rib, spine, and joint, with some slight differences in health and speed, but all with the same basic gun and grenade attacks, and unlimited ammo for both. The game also supports 2-player co-op, a few different difficulty modes, and 6-button controller support, which I highly recommend using. While this could have been an amazing twin-stick shooter, instead you'll be using buttons to rotate your torso while you fire away at the unending mobs of enemies. It definitely takes some getting used to, and you might consider configuring your controls in a way that makes sense to you. Once you get the hang of that, you'll be blasting away through 6 intergalactic levels full of beautiful isometric pixel art, drenched in futuristic, industrial, and otherworldly atmosphere. Aside from the generic beefcake mutants, you'll also be introduced to a few other enemies in each stage, along with a handful of weird and grotesque mini-bosses. You'll sometimes need to switch between your bullets and grenades depending on the situation, but you won't find any kind of power-ups or anything to change up your weaponry. In fact, the only thing you can pick up is cold hard cash, which is only useful for eventually building up enough to grant an extra life, which you might need if you're going for a hard mode clear or a 1cc or something. The game's difficulty is rather reasonable otherwise. With some practice, you'll surely be making your way to Dead Headquarters for a showdown with Cadaver himself, and ultimately testing your moral fiber in a crucial decision to take him alive or in a bloody pile of gore. All in all, I think this is a really solid and fun shooter, and it's definitely worth checking out for the art and music at least. The score provides some especially unique dark and moody ambiance, and will rinse your eardrums with ominous FM drones and deep bass tones. Speaking of the soundtrack, you really should also check out the music for each of the Amiga versions, which maybe doesn't really fit the game all that well, but delivers some ridiculously dope dark trip-hop beats by Martin Iveson. In these Amiga versions, they're alright. The graphics and general gameplay are about the same, and maybe it's the drop to 50 Hz, but it feels a little bit choppier and sloppier than the Genesis port. And the controls are a bit more troublesome, and it's also lacking a few enemy types here and there, and most notably doesn't have the extra final boss fight. It's still very playable if you're an Amiga enthusiast, or if you just want to see the minor differences here and there. And of the 2 versions, you'll probably want to go for the Amiga CD for the best sounding experience. Regardless of what version you play on, I will admit it does feel like some potential was lost here, as Skeleton Krew displays an example of style over substance. Maybe a little more variety in your weaponry, or a more substantial strategy difference between the 3 crew members would have been cool. More bosses could have been fun as well, as some of the stages don't have one, and they just kind of end after destroying random pylons or something. But those are just some minor complaints. I still think this game is super cool, and certainly want to encourage you to complete sometime.